Hello everyone, and welcome to this lesson. Today I'm going to talk about some common linking words used to connect to contradictory or opposing ideas. We call these ideas concession. Sometimes we want to link one idea to another one which is surprising or unexpected, as in these examples. So as you see in this pair of sentences, Sally is rich, she doesn't help poor people. Because of the fact Sally is rich, we expect that she helps poor people, but the opposite happens. So this is an unexpected result or a surprising result. Similarly, in the second pair of sentences, my doctor advised me to stop eating junk food, I still eat it. Because of the fact that my doctor advised me to stop eating junk food, I expect to find in the second clause, I stop eating it. But again, the opposite happens. So the second clause contradicts the first clause. It is then an unexpected result or a surprising result. For linking such contradictory or opposing clauses, we use linking words like but, yet, however, nonetheless, nevertheless, although, even though, in spite of, and finally, despite. To better understand the usage of these linking words, we can group them as follows: but, yet, although, even though, nonetheless, nevertheless, in spite of, despite. As for still and however, they can't be included in the previous groups because they are used differently. Well, let's start by the first group, but and yet. These linking words of concession go in the middle of a sentence. That is, they should be put between sentence 1 and sentence 2. And we put a comma before them. Sentence 2 must be the unexpected result or the contradictory clause. Let us see some examples. Sally is rich. She doesn't help poor people. So this clause in green color is the unexpected result or the contradictory clause. So this must go after but and yet. Sally is rich, comma, but, plus the unexpected result or the contradictory clause. But she doesn't help poor people. We cannot start by this clause. We cannot say Sally doesn't help poor people, but she is rich. Let us combine one more pair of sentences using the same linking words. David revised his lessons well. He failed his exam. So this is the surprising or the unexpected result. Thus, it must always go after but and yet. The answer is David revised his lessons well, comma, yet or but, he failed his exam. As for still, it also goes in the middle of a sentence, but it is punctuated differently. So compare it with but and yet. As you see, but and yet go after a comma, but still goes between a full stop and a comma. Well, let's move on to the next group of linking words. Nevertheless, nonetheless. These also go in the middle of a sentence. They go between sentence 1 and sentence 2. Sentence 2 must be the unexpected result or the contradictory clause. Nevertheless, nonetheless can be put between a full stop and a comma, and we capitalize N, or between a semicolon and a comma, and the N should be small. Now we are going to combine these pairs of sentences using nevertheless. So let's start by the first pair of sentences. Sally is rich. She doesn't help poor people. So the part of the sentence in green color is what we call the unexpected result or the contradictory clause. So it must go after nevertheless. So we can provide two different answers. The first possible answer, Sally is rich. Nevertheless, it is put between full stop and the comma, and N is capitalized. She doesn't help poor people. Or Sally is rich, semicolon. Nevertheless, small n, comma, she doesn't help poor people. The second pair of sentences, the weather was cold, he put on a t-shirt, can be also combined in two different ways. We can put nevertheless between a full stop and a comma, or between a semicolon and a comma. The first possible answer is the weather was cold, full stop, nevertheless, comma, we capitalize N, he put on a t-shirt. The second possible answer, the weather was cold, here, nevertheless is put between a semicolon and a comma, and the N is small. Nevertheless, he put on a t-shirt. As for however, just like but, yet, and still, it can go in the middle of a sentence. We put it between sentence 1 and sentence 2. As for its punctuation, we put it either between a full stop and a comma, or between a semicolon and a comma. When we put a full stop before it, we capitalize H. When we put a semicolon before it, we write small h. Let us see some examples. We are going to combine this pair of sentences, Sally is rich, she doesn't help poor people, using however. So we can provide two different answers. The first possible answer is Sally is rich, full stop, however, capital H, comma, she doesn't help poor people. Or Sally is rich, semicolon, however, small h, comma, she doesn't help poor people. We can also use however in the second sentence, within the second sentence, and we put it after the verb to be. Let me show you an example. So consider this pair of sentences. She is rich, she is not happy. She is not happy is the surprising or unexpected result. So, however, must go within this clause. So, she is rich. It's the first sentence. The second sentence, she is not happy. So, however, should go after the verb to be, is. She is. However, and however should be put between two commas. Not happy. She is rich, full stop. She is, however, not happy. We can also put, however, in the second clause before an action verb or after a modal or an auxiliary verb. So, sentence 1, full stop. Sentence 2, however, goes after a modal or an auxiliary or before an action verb in the second sentence. Let us see an example. Sally is rich, she doesn't help poor people. So Sally is rich is the first sentence, she doesn't help poor people is the second sentence, and this is the unexpected result or the contradictory clause. So however goes within the contradictory clause. And given that the verb in the contradictory clause is an action verb, however should go before it, and it is put between two commas. A third way of using however is by placing it at the end of the second clause after a comma. Let me explain this in more details. So, sentence 1, full stop. Sentence 2, at the end of sentence 2 we put however, and we put a comma before it. So let us combine this pair of sentences in one sentence using however. Sally is rich. She doesn't help poor people. So this is the unexpected result. So however should go at the end of the unexpected result or the contradictory clause. Now let's look at the usage of although, though, and even though. As you see, these linking words of concession can go at the beginning or in the middle of a sentence. When although, though, even though introduces a sentence, a comma is put to separate the first clause from the second clause, and the unexpected result or the contradictory clause must go in the second clause. Remember to follow although, though, and even though by sentence. The clause following these linking words must be a sentence, and these are the four patterns of a sentence. A sentence can be formed with a subject plus verb plus object, subject plus verb plus adjective, or subject plus verb plus adverb. When they happen within a sentence or in the middle of a sentence, the unexpected results or the contradictory clause is placed before the expressions. Now let us combine this pair of sentences using although. As you see, the part of the sentence in green color is the contradictory clause. So if you want to introduce a sentence by although, the contradictory clause should go in the second clause here. So although Sally is rich, comma, we put a comma to separate the two clauses from each other. Although Sally is rich, she doesn't help poor people. If you want to use it within a sentence or in the middle of a sentence, the contradictory clause or the unexpected result should go before although. So she refers to Sally. We have to change or to replace she by Sally. Sally doesn't help poor people, although she is rich. So now we have two different answers. Although Sally is rich, she doesn't help poor people. The second possible answer, Sally doesn't help poor people although she is rich. Here we can replace although by though and even though, because they are used in the same way. As for though, it can also go at the end of a sentence. Sentence 1, sentence 2, comma, though. So it should be preceded by a comma. We waited ages for our food, full stop. The waiter was really nice, though. As you see, a comma is put before though. As regards the last group of linking words of concession, despite and in spite of, just like although, though, and even though, these can go at the beginning or in the middle of a sentence. When they introduce a sentence, a comma is put to separate the first clause from the second clause, and the unexpected result or the introductory clause must go in the second clause. When they happen within a sentence, the contradictory or the unexpected result is placed before the expressions, and no comma is put before them, before despite and in spite of. The difference between although, though, and even though, and despite and in spite of is that despite and in spite of should be normally followed by a noun phrase. A noun phrase means a group of words that function as a noun. Experience is a noun, and his experience is a noun phrase. They can also be followed by gerund, verb plus ing, and if you want to follow them by sentence, you add the fact that plus sentence. Now let us combine this pair of sentences. Sally is rich, she doesn't help poor people, using or with despite. So we can introduce the sentence with despite or put it within the sentence. So if you want to keep this sentence unchanged, you can follow despite by the fact that. Despite the fact that. Look, despite and in spite of can be followed by the fact that plus sentence. Here we have a sentence, and we want to keep it unchanged. Despite the fact that Sally is rich, as you see, it is kept unchanged, comma, plus the second clause, the unexpected result. She does not help poor people. This is one possible answer. So we can rewrite the same sentence using despite, but we are not going to follow it by sentence. We are going to make the sentence a noun phrase. So we can say, despite Sally's richness, rich is an adjective, and the noun that can be formed from this adjective is richness. Despite Sally's richness, comma, plus the unexpected result. She does not help poor people. If you want, you can switch the sequence of the clauses. We can start by the second clause, the unexpected result. Sally doesn't help poor people despite her richness. Now I'm going to provide a third possible answer. I'm going to follow despite by gerund. As I told you, gerund means verb plus ing. So despite, the verb in the sentence is, its base form is be. To make it gerund, you add ing. Despite being rich, comma, Sally does not help poor people. We can also say Sally doesn't help poor people despite being rich. That's all I can say about linking words of concession. And given that practice makes perfect, let us practice these expressions through the following exercise. Now we are going to rewrite this pair of sentences using the linking words of concession at the bottom of the slide. Yet, however, nonetheless, although, though, and in spite of. Samir doesn't exercise. He seems in a good health. So before combining this pair of sentences using the linking words at the bottom of the slide, you have first to identify the unexpected result or the contradictory clause. Samir doesn't exercise. He seems in a good health. The contradictory clause is the second clause. He seems in a good health. Because of the fact Samir doesn't exercise, we expect to find that he is not in a good health. But here we have the opposite. He seems in a good health. So it's the unexpected result. So let us combine this pair of sentences using yet. You've studied that yet goes in the middle of a sentence after a comma. It's like yet. So, given that he seems in a good health is the unexpected result, it must go after yet. Here is the answer. Samir doesn't exercise, yet he seems in a good health. Let us use now however. However also goes in the middle of a sentence. It's like yet and but it is punctuated differently. It goes between full stop and a comma, however, like this, or between semicolon and a comma. If you put semicolon before it, H should be small. We can also insert however within the second sentence. We put it after the verb to be, a modal verb or an auxiliary verb, and before an action verb. So the verb in the second clause is seems. It's an action verb. So however goes before it. Samir doesn't exercise. He, however, seems in a good health. We can also place it at the end of the second sentence, and we precede it by a comma. Samir doesn't exercise. He seems in a good health, however. Let us use now nonetheless. Nonetheless goes in the middle of a sentence between sentence 1 and sentence 2. And we can put it either between full stop and a comma or a semicolon and a comma. Nonetheless. So you are free. You can either put it between full stop and a comma and you capitalize N, or you can change the full stop by a semicolon and N should be small. Let us use now although. Although can be used to introduce a sentence or within a sentence. So let us use it to introduce this sentence. Although we said that this linking word of concession is similar to though and even though. It should be followed by a sentence. The clause following although, though, and even though must be a sentence. And here we have a sentence. Samir doesn't exercise. When although introduces a sentence, we put a comma to separate the first clause from the second clause. And the second clause must be the unexpected result or the contradictory clause. We can rewrite it putting although in the middle of the sentence. And we should switch the sequence of the clauses. Thus, we should start by the second clause. He refers to Samir. Samir seems in a good health. Although, when although happens in the middle of a sentence, we don't put a comma before it. Although he doesn't exercise. You see? So you are free. You can either start by although or put it within the sentence. Though is similar to although. The only difference between though and although is that though can be used at the end of the second sentence. So we can use it just like although here. We can replace although with though. We can say though Samir doesn't exercise, comma, he seems in a good health. Or Samir seems in a good health though he doesn't exercise. We can also say there is a third possible way. Samir doesn't exercise well, full stop. He seems in a good health though, and the comma should be put before though. Let us use now the last linking word, in spite of. We studied that in spite of can be used to introduce a sentence, or it can go in the middle of a sentence. It is similar to despite, and they should be followed by either a noun phrase, gerund, or the fact that plus sentence. So let us use it to introduce a sentence. In spite of. So here, given that we have a sentence, Samir doesn't exercise, we can keep it unchanged. We can keep it unchanged and put before it the fact that. Comma. Sorry. Comma should be put before the second clause. In spite of the fact that Samir doesn't exercise, comma, he seems in a good health. Or we can start the sentence by the second clause and put in spite of in the middle. You can also say Samir seems in a good health, this in spite of the fact that he doesn't exercise. This is the end of the lesson, dear students. I hope it helped you understand how to use linking words of concession, and thank you so much for your attention.